Hi, everyone. This is Maria from Pause Alchemy of Women. And today I'm super excited to be interviewing my dear friend, Monica Ballard, who is a holistic intimacy and relationship coach and sexy woman extraordinaire. And so I'm really excited. We're going to talk about really what anything that comes up involving sex and women and intimacy and menopause and yonis and all the things. So I am thrilled. So hi, Monica.
Hello, my darling. I'm so happy to be here with you. What a treat.
Yes, me too. So is there anything in addition to what I said that you'd like to share about the sort of work that you do or how you want to show the world yourself in this moment?
Yes, absolutely. I have a bio somewhere, but essentially I am supporting women in creating the most amazing relationships and intimacy, including the sexuality part of their intimacy of their entire lives, regardless of what trauma or wounding they've experienced in their lives and also in their relationships, specifically in the past. So that is what I really love to do. And that all begins with the relationship that a woman has with herself. So
Mm,
it's intimacy and relationship, but we always start from within. It's not so much just about like tips and tricks of things to try, like with a lover or how to get a man or how to rekindle. All that stuff matters, but it all starts inside of each individual woman.
yeah, I totally agree. That's great. And so, I mean, I kind of know this a little bit about you, but if you could just give a little bit of many years ago, I was so drawn to Monica as a coach, a mentor, a yoni specialist at the time. If you don't know what that is, you should keep listening.
Yeah.
And so, if you want to talk maybe a little bit about what brought you to being interested in these topics. I mean, obviously,
Mm.
relationships and intimacy is kind of probably important to most of us, but how were you drawn there and how did you get
Mm.
started?
Ooh, that's a really great question. Um, so I ended up discovering, so with relationships, it sort of evolved into my conscious awareness that like, wow, this is a gift. This is something that is like the secret sauce of life. And then so I'm a single mom, and I have two children, and when my oldest son, and so my path of healing my own trauma and my own relationship wounding, right? And not everything in life is trauma. I think we use that word a lot. I actually did come from a lot of trauma though, and a home with a lot of neglect and emotional abuse, substance abuse and addiction, just to clarify that, which had like a great impact on me. And it turned out that it had a great impact on my relationships and the relationships that I was choosing and the dynamics that I was needing to create inside of those relationships to mirror dynamics that I had come to understand as being loving dynamics, loving, or
Mhm.
this is what we do inside of a family. This is how we treat one another inside of a family. And so, in my own quest to overcome and to just, once I became a mom, is really what happened, that I became a mom and I was like unwilling to pass down or to behave in a way that was going to perpetuate pain inside of our family dynamic. And that is what changed my life, actually, ultimately. Because until I had a baby, I did not even have the capacity to love myself or to really know what that meant
Mhm.
to make different choices or change my trajectory. So I became a mom at 28, and then that really launched me onto a healing path. And I had already been on a healing path in terms of like discovering yoga and discovering some herbalism and some other like spiritual practices, but I hadn't really let it penetrate my life. to
Mhm.
where it had changed every facet of my life, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, baby will do that to you, huh? Kind of changes.
We'll do it. And so then when my son was about 3, I was seeking I was seeking to align with nature and with I felt that like somebody must know things about the universe, right? That I don't know, like tribal beings and people that in the past have synced themselves with the rhythms of the universe. And I ended up connecting with some different communities, including the progressive love community. This is on the internet. And then through some people that I met in that community, I began to learn about the yoni egg practice, which we also know as like a jade egg practice, which is I actually have some right here because I'm
I
teaching a
probably have one
course.
within my reach also,
Yeah,
actually.
I was like, wait a minute, I have one because I'm teaching. And I just had gotten a new shipment of these little jade eggs. And so I got into this jade egg practice. So this is actually real jade, certified nephrite jade. But they're little. And so this isn't for intravaginal use. So you put this inside of your yoni, and it is, people kind of more commonly associate it with strength or being tight and toned, but it's actually a holistic practice to for overall sexual well-being. And yes, it supports healthy pelvic floor, um, strength, tone, and dexterity when done properly, but
Mhm.
it's not meant to just be it is also known as vaginal weightlifting, but it's not meant to just be like this pussy CrossFit like extreme uh thing. You know what I mean?
You
Like
say
most
pussy on
women,
Facebook? I think you can.
I think you can. I just did.
My
So
podcast, we say whatever we want. That's why I have no
I
fear
didn't
in
get
our
the
conversation.
I
Monica and I
didn't get
might
the
drop
green
some F
light.
bombs or say
We're
pussy. Just don't be
it's going
alarmed.
to happen. Yes, don't be
I'll
alarmed.
put that in the I'll put that in the introduction. Don't
This
worry.
is a safe space. This is a safe space right now.
And it's interesting because, as I learn more about these things, the strength piece is not always the best. Sometimes we're too rigid in there, and that also is a thing. So I agree with that. Thinking about this practice is it's not just like, let's get strong and tight. And that's some sort of, I believe that's maybe some sort of porn influence of some sort, that isn't necessarily the total goal. It can be the goal.
It's a societal woman hating belief that's been ingrained to believe that something is fundamentally wrong with us, and that once we have a baby that our vagina is loose, or and not just once you have a baby, but like women have vaginal and vulva reconstructive surgery all the time to try to present a certain type of idealized genitals, which may be, created from porn. Which what is pornography? Pornography is entertainment. It's
Mm-hmm.
not real life, it's
Right.
entertainment. And so we are conditioned to hate our realness. And so it's very easy to then introduce another tool and then have that tool, which is the jade egg, co-opted to use against women. One more thing that's not good enough about you. Well, now you have a loose pussy. You better tighten that shit up or else nobody's going to want you. You're a flappy old girl, and it's just not true. It's just not true. And so the reality is that the way the egg works, I already put it away. Um, the jade egg works. My teacher is actually starting full on medical research studies now. So they're going to try to create like a body of work to support this, in other more traditionally accepted forms, right? But it grows and increases the erectile tissue inside of the vagina when you do the practice the way that like I've learned to teach the practice from my teacher, Dr. Saida Desilets. It's called the embodied psychosexual method. So, and that's what I'm talking about the holistic, like we get consent to work with the body. We don't just shove things in there. And again, this is a practice to harmonize and integrate the body, mind, and spirit, you
Mhm.
know, and so it's not about just creating, trying to idealize a vagina or make you more pleasing to a lover. It's it's a way of supporting your overall sexual and sensual health, your emotional health as well. And
Mhm.
I have a program right now, and that is actually the focus of the program, is not just the sexual health but the emotional well-being. Because if you and I'm so happy we're having this conversation right now, because someone just reached out to me today, one of my clients, and I have this saying, which is, an emotional woman is an orgasmic woman. An emotional woman is an orgasmic woman. And most of us are trying to like keep our emotions stuff down.
Right.
We don't want to feel extreme emotions. We don't want anything too badly. We definitely don't want another person too badly, because it feels so vulnerable. Like, oh my God, I want you more than you want me. Like, this is not okay. I
Oh
could be
yeah.
rejected, right? We don't want to have strong feelings. We don't want to feel pain. And so my client was like, I have to share this with you. And she had manifested a new partner in some work that we did together. And they've been together almost a year, and they just did some things together. And she said that she had some emotional, intense moments while they were doing some traveling together. But then she was raw emotionally. And then she was able to have some of the best sex with her partner, including being orgasmic while fully letting him control the situation, where normally that's not her normal thing. It's not easy
Mhm.
for her to access her orgasm in certain ways. And so I asked her, I said, and she said, this was and I said, so what you're saying is this is a result of your emotional openness and rawness. All your shit was finally unleashed, and you weren't trying to keep it, you know, under control. Not that she was hysterical, but she
Right.
was freely flowing, crying, feeling feelings.
Uh-huh.
Boom, incredible orgasm on the waves of surrender to her lover. That was like accessible for her. And so this is one of the things that I love to support women with, is actually integrating and getting some emotional fluency and some emotional mastery. And the egg is just one of the tools
Right.
to do that. But it's supporting us physically, supporting us emotionally. It's just really neat.
I love it. And I love the egg, and I haven't used it in the practice as much as you have. I've actually used it like in a way where I like would go to sleep with it and have my old job was I was a jewelry designer with my ex-husband,
Mm,
and do you remember? And
I do.
I believe so much in the power of the stones to heal us. And so imagine if it's here,
Mm-hmm.
imagine the healing you get if it's internal. And so I've used it that way, but yeah, I think it's such a magical experience to have. And it's ancient, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
something that someone new age in LA came up with. I mean, it's an
That's right.
ancient practice. You know more about that than me, but
Yeah,
yeah.
the format that I learned is, my teacher, she really draws from traditional Chinese medicine and Taoism.
Uh-huh.
And then I've met women, yourself, and then actually I met a couple of other women. One woman who had experienced women in Mexico working with obsidian eggs, and they had a whole ceremony around it. And so I sort of think, and I have no evidence of this whatsoever, but after talking to people, I think that in the times before modern, where birth and sexuality was taken into a medical
Mm,
sort of context, before that, when women were sovereign in their bodies and in birth and in menstruation and everything, um, I think there probably were more cultures that had practices to support the genitals.
yeah.
So it's
I
not
was thinking,
surprising to me
mhm.
that the
I was thinking
Mexican.
that as you were talking, I was kind of thinking, I guarantee there are many cultures that we don't even know that they do this because, the jade egg, because of the jade, is obviously kind of linked to China. But I would imagine, like, I live in Peru. I don't know if they've done that here, but I mean, yeah, I imagine Mexico. And as you were talking, I thought, yeah, like I said, I have no evidence to to back this up either, but it feels like I would imagine that many cultures or women are using something similar.
Right.
I feel
The
like.
obsidian, like obsidian in Mexico, this volcanic glass, like it just made a lot of sense to me. And it is a really cool thing to be able to talk with women about, and to be able to, it really does a lot for um improving the quality of your pleasure and your orgasm, and but also at creating greater freedom and self-acceptance in your body, confidence, and increasing pleasure with a lover. This is
Mhm,
huge for people, especially if they are integrating any type of past sexual trauma,
mhm,
and you may not be, not everybody is. It's however, it doesn't mean that we're, one of the myths I think around intimacy and sexuality, because we're biologically sexual beings, doesn't mean we're good at sex. We are naturally sexual beings, and we don't really know how to skillfully be intimate, especially if we haven't been taught and people are learning from pornography. So I
mhm,
think it's really great to be a learner, to be willing to be a learner and a student of intimacy and sexuality. And that means a student of our own bodies, and uncovering, like, what do I like? What is my, what is my pleasure? What does bring me alive? We can't
mhm,
expect someone else to give us something that we can't give ourselves. And if we don't increase the capacity for our body to feel pleasure, even if our partner is doing all these party tricks, it's not going to do nothing.
yeah, and I
It's going to do
wanted to,
nothing.
that's actually not party tricks, but we're going before that. I it's funny for me because I work with perimenopausal women and menopausal women and women getting older, and all of these things that are supposedly like failing or getting worse or not getting, getting less attractive and getting more wrinkled, and maybe your body's changing and all of this stuff. And then there's this piece of when you're 20,
Mhm.
I had a fantastic body. I was, doing the Cindy Crawford workout was my jam. I would do sit-ups while I watched TV. It was the 90s, okay.
Yes,
And
girl. Yes.
I looked amazing, but did I know what I liked? Did I know how my body worked? Did I know how to say, hey, I don't like that, or hey, I like it like this? I didn't know any of those things. And even if I did, I sure as hell wasn't going to say it.
Yes.
So,
And that's
so
so
that's the
cool.
thing about
That's
getting
so
older
cool what
that
you're
you're
just
like,
saying.
yes.
Oh, yes. And I don't want to cut you off. I want you to go back to what
No,
you're
no, that's
saying
okay.
about getting older. But I just was listening to a podcast from Michaela Boehm, who's like a woman that I love, that I want to work with eventually. And she does this kind of work. And but her own type of thing too. And she said, one thing I've learned is, or no, maybe it wasn't her. I'm sorry. I listened to a lot of stuff.
Me too.
Either way, this teacher was saying, you just because a woman might look sensual, or
Hmm.
maybe she has boobs, nails, lashes, like she might appear to be comfortable in her femininity or something like that, doesn't matter. You cannot judge the appearance of a woman and say this woman is having great sex, this woman is having successful intimacy.
Hmm.
And which is what you just said. I looked hot, but I didn't know how to open up and actually know what I liked, and I definitely didn't know how to communicate that with a partner in an effective way.
Right. Right. I mean, that's one of the benefits. I mean, we don't have to talk about getting older necessarily, but that's one of the things as I'm 46 and you're somewhere in there. And,
Mm-hmm.
at,
44.
like saying what you like and saying, hey, I don't feel like doing that. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to do whatever you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And being comfortable, because I know with that thing of trauma too, this piece, because I think, I understand what you're saying about trauma, because it does get thrown a lot around a lot as a buzzword and things. Everything's trauma these days, right? But also, I think a traumatic effect, for instance, can come from many years of being younger and not having a dramatic trauma. But I often talk with women about this thing of saying, even in your non-sexual life, saying yes when you want to say no.
Correct.
And then it comes into your sexual life of like, well, I already got this far. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can do that,
Mm-hmm.
and saying yes in a way that wasn't forced, but it wasn't what you want. And I feel like that can kind of just like gently, little by little, stack in the traumatic realm until
Yeah,
your body's like, oh, I'm doing
that's
things I don't.
a form of sexual violence.
Mm-hmm. But like little
Yeah.
mini ones, but then they get like,
The
and
body takes that in, and that's one reason why so when I work with women, there's sometimes women come in and they're single, but sometimes they come in and they're partnered. And if they're partnered, one of the first things that we usually do, doesn't not always, everything's context specific, but one of the big things that we do is you have to be able to say no if you really want to say yes.
mm-hmm.
So if you can't say no, if you're not allowed to say no, meaning like your no is not well received, like let's say you physically can say no, but if you do, somebody gives you a guilt trip
Mm-hmm.
or somebody um overtly gives you the silent treatment, or they withdraw attention in some way, or they criticize you, that means that your no is not welcome. And so that means that your yes is always a lie. It's built on a lie, because if you can't freely give your no, then your yes is really just a crock of shit. It doesn't mean anything. Okay?
Right. If you're always saying yes, then what is it? When is it
We
if you
don't
actually have to say yes? Right.
There's no distinction. And so if we want um to reawaken our natural erotic fire, or our natural sensual fire, and our power, then that's rooted in sexual sovereignty, which is being the ruler of your own kingdom, right? The ruler of your own body, mind, and spirit. And so in order to do that, we have to I work with something called radical permission. And so that means that, like, I usually have women go to their partner and say, okay, I'm doing this because I want to get closer. And so in the interest of getting closer, I'm actually going to not be sexual with you at all for X amount of time until I want to. Now, sometimes women are hesitant at first to do this for all these reasons. It's very loaded. It's very loaded. Like, well, what if my partner goes and cheats on me? I'm not really allowed to say no. Like, it's not loving or caring to his feelings. It's like, or her feelings. Like, it's not whatever. There's all these excuses,
Mm-hmm.
but yet she's to a place where perhaps her body is revolting. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that happens is like, if we have sex against our will long enough, we begin to develop medical conditions, pain with sex,
Mm-hmm.
vulvodynia, yeast, bacterial vaginosis, irritation during or after sex, inability to orgasm. There's all these issues that can happen and arise
Mm-hmm.
um, as a result of, and there's more. It can come out in other symptoms: back pain, fibromyalgia,
Yeah.
inflammatory conditions. So we want to teach women first how to what does it feel like to have a yes in your body, and we reestablish that with ourselves first, because we don't
Mm-hmm.
realize that we're participating in our own harm by essentially continuing to allow ourselves to be penetrated and penetrating our own selves without listening. So we deny the intrinsic wisdom of the body when we do that. And this is not like a whiny thing. This is not like some kind of like hysterical thing. This your body will give you a distinct yes and no if you actually check in and you ask, like, is it time? And if we're with a lover, it can be very erotic to teach our lover how to ask, are you ready to be penetrated by me? This is not like a boring, like, well, now great. now I need to ask, like, what's going on? Like, no, this is hot. Like, this is very sexy. This is very erotic. Let me learn to listen. Let me learn to evoke you. Let me learn to make you ready for me. And for
Mhm.
and then for each woman, it's how can I know myself so that I know how to bloom? I know how to become ready. I know when I'm ready for you.
Mhm. Yeah. And also just this, I mean, I don't want to talk too personally because my mommy's on here, but
Girl, your
um,
mom can handle it.
loves it.
Your mom's
Um,
cool AF.
no, but this thing of, with my partner, he's like, oh, I actually would prefer to have sex less. But when you really want to, it's a whole different thing.
Mhm.
I mean, that can't feel good to be like, all right, I guess. Like, I would never be with someone like that. And I'm not, it's not that I don't want to, but when I really want to, it's a whole different experience for him. So
Mhm.
he's learned to really appreciate that. But I had to tell him, and I had to sort
Mhm.
of like teach, I had to know it in myself and teach him in a way that was loving, but also when I don't want to, I don't want to. That's how it is,
Mhm.
These are two people coming together. This shouldn't be like, so I think that's kind of a pattern with us is that as women, we often are people pleasers. We say yes when we want to say no, and we say, okay, I guess I don't really want to,
Mhm.
but I'll do it. And then, the resentment is building and all the things. So I think this is just another place where our pattern that we often have is coming out in a strong
Oh my
way.
gosh. And here's a whole other thing that you just walked into this can of worms, because this is another reason why this is context specific. Because there's other times where, like, if you've established your relationship and you and sort of like, this is a spectrum, of course, right? But like, for me, for what I desire, and a lot of the women that come into my realms, right? Like, if we know why we're in relationship, if we know why we're prioritizing intimacy, which doesn't always have to be penetration sex, but like intimacy, erotic aliveness, then yeah, there's going to be times where I do need to go to sleep or whatever.
Right.
But the point of, I'm not going to leave my intimacy to chance.
Mm,
So my partner and I are going to have communication. We're going to have sex dates. We're already prioritizing our intimacy. So I don't need to feel if I can't perform sexually, or if I'm like really tired, but my lover is feeling really amorous, if they know me really well and I'm tired, but that's it, then like I know that the sex is going to be so good that I'm going to be energized by that. And so sometimes I actually do want to be coerced, but it's
mm.
inside of a loving container. And as soon as we get going, I'm actually like, hallelujah, praise the Lord. That was exactly what I needed to like to move my energy. But it's all context specific, right? Like, that's inside of a loving relationship where we're using sex and intimacy as healing, and we're serving one another. It's not just like a using taking type of a dynamic. So a lot of times we have to go in and change the way that we're looking at our sex and intimacy inside the relationship in the first place, and recreate a new, more conscious dynamic. And it's not that hard to do.
And for me, yeah, I definitely, when I'm in a partnership, because I have been in that where it's like, oh, fine. Like if you don't want to, then it's like, oh God, you never want to, this dramatic thing. Or like how you said, some sort of silent treatment or pouting or, I mean, I understand if I want to and the other person doesn't want to, I'm annoyed too. But, rein it in a little bit because we
Mm-hmm.
are two people. And so if I'm with someone like that, it's really a lot harder for me
Mm-hmm.
to want to be coerced or anything like that. But if I'm with someone who doesn't act that way and will
Mm-hmm.
take a respectful no and
Mm-hmm.
be fine with it, or at least, try and be fine with it, then that's a whole different It's a whole different scene for
Right. It's a
sure.
different level of the quality of relationship.
Hmm.
And we can't separate sex and intimacy from the quality of the relationship.
Right.
And so that's another huge part of what I do, is the work outside of the bedroom that leads us to the bedroom, the intersection of a woman and who she is on her own, and who she is as a human being and a feminine being. And then also, how does she show up and wear all these different hats, and her beliefs about women and about men and relationship and what is possible inside of relationship. And um, that is all the stuff that matters before we ever get naked or get to the bedroom.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I have a friend that says you got to get naked before you get naked. And she's referring to vulnerable naked,
Yeah.
like emotionally naked before you get
Yes.
naked, which is not usually how most of us started or ever learned. So it's so interesting, these pieces. And yeah, I feel like it's so funny because I'm talking to a lot of women lately doing this podcast, and it doesn't actually matter what the topic is that we talk about or want to work on, or that the woman has as her job, because it comes down to this piece of knowing yourself first, saying yes when you want to say yes, no when you want to say no, honoring your body, honoring your needs. It's like the basis of every topic. All the topics go well if you
Mm-hmm.
do these pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I know you have whole programs on these things, but
Right.
what do you recommend for um, getting like a simple way, or a way to
Mm.
start to get to these places, honoring yourself, saying, yeah, I have lots of ideas that I talk about all the time, but I'm curious to see how you feel about, how
Ooh.
do you feel about starting to say yes when you want to say yes, and no when you want to say no, in general, not even sexually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And I think so. I have a mantra, a prayer that I use, and I teach a practice for like checking in and being able to really start to get a clear picture of how you are feeling and all this other stuff. So the first thing that I would say is you have to get a clear picture of your current reality. So like what, and this could be at any given moment that you sit down in the day, like you take a break, or it could be first thing in the morning. At any given moment,
Mm-hmm.
first, what's the state of my being? Physically, what is the state of my being? Am I tense? Am I numb? Is there pain? Is there openness? Is there any pleasure? Like, what is the state of my being? And then what is the state of my emotions? Can I name my emotions? Right? Is there
Mm-hmm.
anger? Is there sadness? Is there contempt? Are there sexual feelings? Is there fear? Is there joy? What are my feelings? Do they have a color? Do they have a texture? Do they have a location?
Mm-hmm.
Let me get a clear idea of what's going on. Is there anything in this little container that's a 911, right, that I need to get like immediately in touch with? And so practicing actually just like connecting to the self. And then the next thing is to ask, and I have a way to say this. I say, on the altar of your heart,
I
you're
remember that.
asking, yes, you're asking, what would I love? And I take it a step further, because when we ask that, everybody often, we're very stuck in our heads.
Mm.
And so the reality is that you have intrinsic desires, and your
Mm-hmm.
desires are born out of your uniqueness. But your desires, they live in your body. They're not just ideas in your head. They're much deeper than that. And so we want to say, well, what do I want? And then we want to list it off like a to-do list, like we're thinking of it in our mind. And so what
I'm
I
like
tell
with
people,
all my lists.
yeah, now,
Taking
and
it.
it's okay. We do want to write stuff down. But what I try to get people to do is, I don't really accept their first responses to me about like, what would I love? It's like, those are probably like somewhat okay, normalish answers, and kind of probably a little bit bullshit. So like, what would I love? And then you want to ask your higher self, like, okay, divine beloved, spirit, source, universe, whatever, cosmic consciousness, you show me what I would love that I haven't even thought of yet, that would surprise and delight me, that's in alignment with my highest essence. You show me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This assumes that I don't know every fucking thing. This assumes that I actually might be shown a perspective that I have not yet seen. And so
Mm-hmm.
then you just let it bubble up. You let it bubble up. So, like, how can you begin to know what your yes and no is? Well, you need to connect with your true desire.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are actual practices for walking through what does a no feel like in my
Mm-hmm.
body and what does a yes feel like. And in my work, we're looking for the triple yes: a yes in the head, a yes in the heart, a yes in the yoni. Okay. And you've all done it. We've all done it where we knew it was a yes here, wasn't a yes there, like whatever. You've seen what happens in your own life when you've been around the block a few times. You're like, I know what happens when I mix my yeses. You know what I mean? Like, okay.
I've
So
experienced the reverse.
yeah.
No up here.
And a yes down here. And then what happens? Right. So
Okay.
we and that does not have to just be sexual,
Mm-hmm.
to look for the triple yes. And so we also, like, in my work, this and just what we're talking about, this idea of like being able to be radically honest, right? Like what you're saying, like, how can I show up authentically? Because if I'm people pleasing, that's not authenticity.
Right.
I understand why we do it, but it's not actually authentic. And so I need to be able to be in touch with what I would really like. I need to be able to start to feel and listen to my own inner truths. And then
Mm-hmm.
that involves getting out of my head and getting into my body and hearing what in the heck is she saying also. And then my heart, and asking for that other um guidance that's supernatural, you could say.
Mm-hmm. It's so, yeah, this is so important because I just, I don't know if you saw my podcast with my friend Claire, who is a yoga instructor. She was talking about embodiment in a different
Mm,
way, but I think that
mm,
that's, I don't know if it's specifically with our culture too, but we're definitely all up here and thinking, thinking, thinking. And then in so many ways shut off from the body, either from pain, from what sort of foods make us feel good, what kind of sex makes us feel good, what's a no in my body. And that's always why I liked to travel. You know me, I've traveled a lot. And
yeah.
when we're in, our job and in our family and with our group of friends that really know us, we often get into some habits, I notice. And say at your job, a new person comes and you're
Mm,
like, no, this person
mm,
is not
mm-hmm,
for me for
mm-hmm,
whatever reason, man, woman. And I have felt it in my body of like, ugh, no, I do not like
mm-hmm,
this person
mm-hmm,
for whatever reason. And then my head says like, oh, you're just being so judgmental. Why don't you just be nice? Give them a chance. Meh, meh, meh. And then often I was right, but
mm-hmm.
I kind of ignored it based on these like social constructs that we've had. And so when I travel,
Niceness. Yeah.
yeah, and when I try, it's like I'm a coworker, have to be
Sure.
okay. But when I travel, I noticed that it really helped my intuition and my body wisdom
Mm,
to, I traveled alone a lot. And so, come to South America by myself, there's certain things, not that it's not dangerous like what most people in the US have said to
sure,
me,
sure.
but, I'm traveling, I'm a woman alone and, getting on buses and doing different things, being in hotels by myself and stuff. You got to be a little more aware than my normal surroundings.
Mm-hmm,
And what I loved about traveling is that, especially traveling by yourself, is that there's no one to be like, oh, Maria, don't be like that. Let's just
mm-hmm.
try it. Like I was like, nope, this person, I hate this person. Nope. This street, nope.
Right.
Go to a hotel and it looks like I reserved it. And then I'm like, no friggin' way,
Yeah.
leave. And so that really created kind of like more of a confidence in my body and intuition by being able to be liberated from these constructs. So it's
Mm.
interesting, the piece of embodiment, because we are just so in our heads all the time, I feel like.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that's another main piece um of the work that I that I love about this work that I get to do is it does bring in the embodiment, and in a few different ways. That's another reason for that term, for using that term holistic,
Mm-hmm.
um, because a lot of the women that I am working with are very advanced, like very powerful, successful women who are self healers, who have done a lot of talk therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even other modalities that are very effective, like EMDR, breath work. Like they may have done a lot of all of that. And so then we're bringing on, we're adding in those other pieces, because if you can't have a conversation and regulate your nervous system, you can't move into deeper intimacy because your brain is telling you that you're in fight or flight. And so
Mm-hmm.
I like to work at the intersection of like, how do I show up as the person I want to be
Mm-hmm.
in real life, in the moment, and bring my whole healed self? I'm doing all this work to quote, heal myself or to integrate my stuff. And then how does that actually make my life better? How does that make my relationship better? And it
Mm-hmm.
happens at the intersection of the body and who we are physically being in the moment.
Mm-hmm. You can't really separate that anyway. You can't separate. I had a very nearly frustrating conversation with someone who was like, well, there's your brain, your mind and your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, that's in my body. And they're like, no, like your body, not your brain. I was like, well, what? Like, was my head not attached? Like this part is actually attached to the body.
Right. And to the
It's
nerves, you
like,
can't get it out.
it's just like outrageous how we've come to feel like this is a thing that actually even exists. I mean, your thoughts maybe are not your body, but
Right.
it's like, how are we even feeling like we're separated from this thing that is attached to our head?
And your thoughts impact the experience that you're having in your body, like
Right.
what you're saying. You can't get them out. And your emotions, which is why your emotions can make you sick, right?
Right.
Which is why we talk about the psychosexual component of sexual wellness, and women who go into the doctor who have a medical issue. Okay, this also can go, like you wanted to talk about menopause, stress and emotions. I myself went into early perimenopause in 2 years ago. I'm 44 as
Uh,
a result of stress, right?
uh,
And so our our emotional state, our emotions impact the body, even
mm-hmm.
though science and medicine doesn't fully understand it. They also do not refute it, even though they don't really know what to do about it. But it's like,
Right.
oh, you have vaginal pain, you have this irritation, you have this inflammation, you have this yeast, and you feel betrayed by your partner. Like no one's talking about the emotional component, or you feel like your partner lied to you, or you feel neglected by your partner, you feel used, you want more of something, you feel like you're taking crumbs, whatever it may be. You don't feel comfortable to rock the boat, to express openly in a way that's going to move the needle forward. But guess what? The pussy never lies, and she's pissed. That's
Right.
the angry kitty.
Well, and it's funny because, um, the I feel like there's this fundamental difference. I saw a comedian years and years ago, which you may have seen, or we might have talked about this a long time ago, but it was like men like to say if you're in a fight, men want to like sex their way out of the feeling of the fight
Mm-hmm.
because of the nature of their being.
Mm-hmm.
As women, if we're still mad or upset or
Mm-hmm.
betrayed, she said, you're supposed to open like a flower instead of this. You want to be closed like this. And it is kind of the nature of our being of, for me, if I'm mad or I don't like
Hurt.
you,
Yeah.
there's, I don't want it. Like there's nothing, coercing unless
Right.
we've this thing,
Worked it through. Yeah.
or at least even if I'm not mad, but I'm not feeling like with my ex, I was never feeling honored in the relationship. I was never feeling cared for. We didn't do any sort of things that I deemed romantic in any way, not like necessarily flowers and chocolates and things, but like
Sure.
saying
Connected.
no togetherness during the day. And then I used to joke and say I'd be, getting ready to go to bed, and he would come in like in my arm, like, ready? No,
Mm.
absolutely not. There's nothing, no sexiness in a man that could make me come out of that without getting some emotional attention. So
Mhm.
it's an interesting.
It's juicy. I know. And this is why we need these skills. Like, the
Yeah.
thing is, if you're with someone long enough, like, you can trade partners. But if you
Mhm.
don't learn how to deal with your shit and understand that you're always attracting a partner that's going to reflect your beliefs about men or about women, like, you at some point will run into conflict with this other person because no one's perfect, and we're going to bump into each other, we're going to hurt each other, we're going to wound each other. And what we're needing in this modern day time is we're needing an upgraded set of skills to repair and to move forward, to
Mhm.
repair and to move forward inside of that relationship. And just because a relationship transitions or closes out or ends, it doesn't mean that it's failed. But
Uh-huh.
I believe that we wouldn't have as many relationships that would have to end if we also, some of those would still need to end. They've run their course, and that's fine. We live longer than ever before. And we also aren't equipped to work through conflict in our relationships. So, and because we live longer than ever before, and there's all these different demands on relationship, and there's a lot of really amazing people talking about this nowadays, Esther Perel being one of the main
Mhm.
people who talks about this, like, looking to have all of your needs met by one person.
Go by
Like,
one person.
there's all
Mhm.
these different, like, components. But in general, if we increased our ability to have emotional literacy and also to actually work through conflict in relationship, then we could get back to this other place. But a lot of us have resisted gathering those skills because it feels like a pathology, like a shameful thing. Like, you only go to therapy if something's wrong with you, and that
Mm.
everybody else just magically knows how to make it work. And it's the people who go to therapy that are somehow damaged. And it's actually, that's the biggest myth, because
Yeah.
no one, we should really be getting this education perhaps in school.
Yeah.
And in Denmark, they teach emotional literacy starting in like the first and second grade. And we don't teach any emotional skill set whatsoever in our culture, in the collective
Guys, squash
culture.
it down.
Yeah.
Squash it down.
So anyway, I think that's a huge part of the issue is like, and you can learn how to do that with someone else, but like, all of that begins inside of how I relate with my own emotions, my own nervous system. When I'm able to hold space for myself and work through my feelings, and I know how to do that, I can also facilitate that for you. Whether you're my bestie, whether you're my lover, whether you're my client, right?
Mhm.
Because I can hold space for the full spectrum of who I am and move through it and come back to my common, what is my value here in the relationship? Why am I here? Well, you know what? In my relationships, that's a spiritual practice. I'm in relationship to become the best version of myself and to support whoever I'm with in becoming the best version of their self, whether they are my lover or my friend or my child or whatever. I'm
Mhm.
I'm pouring out my life, and I'm in relationship with the earth, and I'm in relationship with spirit. It's all a relationship,
Mhm.
you know? But
Important.
without that why, it's so easy to get off track. It's like, so I guess what I'm kind of referring to in this conversation is like another level of consciousness. How rich and healing can relationships be? It's something that's happening anyway. You bring an added level of mindfulness, consciousness, and values to it. And it can be this thing that's like really just huge for enriching one's life and
Mhm.
for creating ripples of healing and love and connection that we all need.
Definitely. I love that so much. And I know you only have a little bit left because she's got
Mm,
some clients. And so we're obviously not going to talk about menopause, but we can have
mm,
you back another time. We'll specifically talk about menopause. It's like also Monica and I used to live in California where she lives, and we used to get to talk all the time, and now we haven't talked. So I feel like I
I
can talk
know,
to you
we're catching up.
forever. But I do just want to, so just like a final sort of question here, before I let you go. Um, what's my question? So one of the issues that, I mean, just to briefly touch on my subject of getting older and menopause,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that happens that I keep hearing from women is then you get to this point, and honestly, sometimes you start to hate your husband or your partner or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe been together a long time, maybe you had kids that have left. And so in some cases, of course, in some cases, you should break up. There's nothing left between
Mm-hmm.
the two of you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
however, whatever the dynamic, it's really not
Mm-hmm.
for one or both of you. Okay. That aside, sometimes I feel like there's this piece of you get to the point where you've like had enough. And so maybe that's your job, maybe that's your kids, maybe that's what you're doing in your life, maybe that's your partner. And I really think that some of that feeling is kind of what we're talking about now. So, not knowing yourself, not asking for what you need and desire, not knowing yourself enough to be able to share that with your partner. And so, I'm not sure how to formulate that as a question, but what are your thoughts on that? Of this piece of, getting to your 40s and 50s, and maybe you've been your partner for a long time, maybe not,
Mm-hmm.
but then not necessarily wanting to break up, but having to shift that dynamic to yourself. So I
Mm-hmm.
find these things sometimes are easier when you're kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to do these things, and then I'm going to get into a relationship, and maybe I'll consciously choose someone a little more suited to where I want to be. But when you're already in one that maybe is 20 years in, and you want to
Can
make
feel
this,
hard.
you want to
Yeah.
make this shift. What are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on that?
I love that. I think it's very juicy. And I do a lot of work with women on that subject as well. Um, it goes back to initially the radical permission piece, like if they've become enmeshed and they're no longer operating from a source of like sovereignty, like if they've fallen, or an orientation of sovereignty rather, if they've fallen into like what you're describing and being super enmeshed, and maybe it's time to redefine the relationship or whatever. But here's the good news: you don't, if you try to get out of a relationship before you've done the work that I'm going to kind of describe, it usually won't work. And you've seen that happen over and over, where
Or
like,
you
even
just
if
get
you,
into the same one. You get into
yeah,
the same
but no, really, you could move out and still end up fighting on the phone with this person every day. Or let's say you're co-parenting, so you hurry up and you try to get your divorce, but you're like actually you're still finding yourself really deep in some kind of like battle. You're embroiled with one another. So like, I don't really advise this. Like when people come to me and they're in this situation, we start doing the work on the inside, because when you change, everything around you changes. You change your relationship to everything when you change. And then that person will either raise to match your vibration, or they will vibrate out of your experience in what we call a universal divorce. Meaning you could have kept trying to fix it and trying to fix it and not, and running into blocks. But as soon as you surrender and you say, I'm going to work on myself, that thing will either, and I've seen this happen over and over. Women who couldn't figure out how to get out of a relationship. We start working together, they start doing their work, and then maybe that person divorces them after all
Mm,
this time of feeling like I'm never going to even just. And what I kind of like to say is that like spirit will always do the heavy lifting once
mhm.
you once you begin to delve within and receive that support um and get that radical honesty. And a huge part of that is usually being witnessed on some level, because a lot of times the women that, like women, they hold back giving themselves any kind of support. They're
Mhm.
usually very badass. They're very highly functioning. They're the one everybody always comes to for support. And so this is actually a problem. It's a problem because your greatest strength, if overused, will become a weakness,
Yeah.
right? So we
Uh-huh.
need to practice. Like, am I saying that you should go take advice from like everybody and anybody? No, of course not. But the right support is available for each and every one of us when we open up and ask for it from within first. When we say, you know what, I really need support, I need to be held. And that's what actually creates shift and transformation. And is that right level of support and being witnessed, because most of my clients, they just when they come in, they're just not seeing things fully clearly. They're seeing things through their
Mhm.
own lens, and together we do a few things and clear the glass a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And then but that means we have to, that even that is a relationship. It's a relationship that if we're so used to being tough and doing all this stuff, and sometimes we're not good at, we think we want to be loved, we're not always that good at actually letting it happen.
Yeah. That's true. And I think that piece is really important because especially in what I asked about, in these 40 and 50s, and maybe you've been with a partner for a while. And it's like one of the things that I find is that we're not getting the things that we want, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't know exactly what we want and we don't know how to ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in and out of the bedroom
Mm-hmm.
in any scenario. If you don't know what it is you want, first of all, no one is a mind reader, really. Well, unless
Yeah.
that's your job to be a mind
Yeah.
reader, I guess. Maybe
Right.
someone, maybe that's
It's
somebody.
your
I guess
main job. That's your only gig.
that's,
Yeah.
but especially men, we do think differently, and we're kind of like putting a lot on them. This isn't just to defend them, but putting a lot of like, just you should just know. And if
No,
we don't know,
that's all
we don't
bullshit. Yeah.
talk. And really, the easiest relationships are when you say, "Hey, this is what I need. Are you able to give this to me or not?" It's pretty clear.
Absolutely. And I have an entire, so like on that level, that is what we do in my 6 week intensive. And that one
Mhm.
does not have jade egg. That is inner, that is a lot of inner work. There's still some embodiment because there's always a little embodiment, but that's a lot of like the inner work, because
Mhm.
the women who come to me, we're talking like very highly successful women. They
Mhm.
don't know what they want. And
Right.
it's normal across the board. And they look at me like, I had a lady, one of my favorite jokes is she had said to me, I don't even know how to decide what restaurant I want to eat at for dinner. And you want me to tell you like what I would love? Like, I don't know. And and then there's all these feelings about that. Well, when we start and we are willing to slow down and we do it in this counterintuitive way, because whenever we start working together, it's like, are you willing to go only as fast as the slowest part of you? First of all, like, what does that even fucking mean? Well, what's the slowest part of you? And I'm asking women to invest. Like, this won't work for you if you're not willing to invest time in yourself, a minimum of 15 to 30 minutes. And certainly you can't get what you aren't willing to give. So like that's fully up to you. You know what I mean? Like I don't care. It's like if that's working for you, great. But like, what is the slowest part of me? I'm going to invest in figuring out what that is, and I'm going to go slow, and then I'm going to tune in and get in touch with what my desires are. And then the beautiful thing is the universe wants to bring us what we desire. It's bringing us what we don't desire. It's bringing us, we have a lot more power than we think. So inside that long-term relationship, if you are waiting around for your partner to care more than you about making it better, good luck. Good luck. If you are the one, because women say this all the time, it's not fair. Why should I have to do this? Why should I have to be the one to take the steps? And I say to you, if you are the one in discomfort, it's your fucking problem. If you are the one who is not 100% satisfied, then this is now your fucking problem. And you have the responsibility out of self care to address it.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean you go blasting down walls. You know what I mean? It means you say, I care so deeply about this that I'm willing to explore this. I'm unwilling to live my life in a disconnected state. I'm unwilling to live my life feeling that I have magnetized love that I am now in resistance with. What matters to you? You have to actually like let yourself care.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, and that's why I don't, it means nothing to me that someone's been in a marriage for like 20 years. Big fucking deal. Have you been miserable for 20 years?
Often you hear people say, well, the first 5 were good. Like that doesn't
See,
count
that's
then.
gross. No. Okay, so what? So you're numbed out. You're somehow able to cope with this. And it's like, no, I want more than just coping. So it really depends on your values. And the women that I'm working with, they will not settle for anything. They've been through so much, and yet they have a sense that, like, wow, life at its core is about relationship. And I'm the common denominator in all my relationships. So let me fucking figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's my thrill. That's like my greatest thrill. And just talking about this, it's like, because we have so much more power. The universe is never trying to rub our face in anything. It's never like, this isn't for you. You know, you don't get to have this that other people have. That is never, ever, ever true. But we are the only ones capable of creating a new and different outcome. And I
Yeah.
have women having orgasms with men for the first time in their 50s and 60s. Girl,
Oh, you just got a bunch of people to join your program right there.
having the best sex of their lives and partnerships after doulaing a partner to death, after divorce, after empty nest. I watch women. There is nothing you cannot have. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to decide that you're going to have it.
Right. Well, that is so good. I love that. And so, yeah, well, I know that you have to get going, so I will let you go, but hopefully we'll be able to talk about menopause some other time.
Let's book it. Let's book it.
Menopause. And I will put a link to Monica's exciting things in the comments and on the show notes. And yeah, this is so great. I love talking about all this stuff with you. You are a wealth of information and fun things.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope this was still good, even though we were like all over the place.
Yeah. Well, my people are used to the all over the place with me. So
Okay, good. I love it.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Monica. Like I said, I'll link to your pages, and it was so great to hear from you.
So great to hear from you.
Thank you.